Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Hey, you all stay safe and well out there. We're coming to you once again by way of Zoom. How about this? Voting on June 2nd, Anesthetists on the front lines. Then the majority leader of the Statehouse weighs in on their opening up the Pennsylvania economy. As they say, let's get to it.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
All right, welcome back to the program. Joining me is Brian Cutler. He's the majority leader in the State House. He represents the 100th Legislative District, which is in southern Lancaster County. Mr. Leader, thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me, Terry.
Well, let's talk first of all about the I'll call it Start the Economy legislation that the House passed, the Senate passed, that went on to the governor. We'll talk about the governor and his response in a moment. Bottom line, what are the main ingredients in that bill? That's point number one. And point number two, why do you think it's necessary to pass legislation to get the economy rolling again in the state?
Sure. The bill really is very simple. The two main components are that it would rely on the CISA, the critical infrastructure list that the Department of Homeland Security at the federal government puts out, that list of critical businesses, as well as the CDC safety guidelines that those businesses have to follow in order to be open. And the reason we believe that it's important to do so is because the current process really isn't working. As members of the House, we've all heard from business owners in our districts regarding the shutdown, in addition to the waiver process that was kind of invented immediately thereafter. Unfortunately, the waiver process really resulted in a lot of inconsistency. Some businesses that were in direct competition with each other, one would get a waiver, one would not. There was one business who reported accidentally applying twice. They hit the submit button twice, and they got one approval and one denial. So the goal of the bill really is to make things consistent so that all similar businesses can follow the same safety guidelines, and then the entire swath of business would be open or closed based off of that list. This list actually was the starting point for the governor's own list, and we just want some consistency on that, as well as transparency, because the list is very simple. The companies are all assigned NAICS numbers, and you know your number, and you can look on it and see if you're in or you're out. So it would make it easier for business owners, it would make it transparent, and most importantly, it would remain consistent across competitors.
Well, when the vote was taken in both the House and the Senate, it was, as they often say, along party lines. The Democrats didn't support it. Obviously, if I understand their point of view, they think it's too early to begin to do that. It's about health. The governor has, obviously has taken that position. How many different ways can you say veto? Not going to become law. So, I mean, the bottom line is, what's the next step? How do you deal with Democrats who think, it's about health, and then later with the economy? Many Republicans think you can do both. Where do you go from here? That's the big question.
Well, I think you really highlighted why I think it's important that we do this, as well as maintain the public health, because we need to be able to do both in order to continue operating and functioning as a society and as a commonwealth. When you look at the current health issues that have happened, really what has led to, there's 1.4 million people in unemployment, and our phones have been ringing off the hooks here in the district office. Individuals who have applied and haven't heard anything, individuals who applied and didn't hear anything from the waiver process for the business openings. And the main complaint that I've heard from constituents is there was no plan coming into this, because obviously it was totally unexpected and it's being implemented as we go. That's why during my floor comments, I made the mention that it's important that we focus on the moment and the immediate need, which was public health. That's why we passed protective equipment legislation. We passed funding for hospitals to buy that equipment, and we made those provisions. But at the same time, we have to also look forward to how will you reopen the economy? Because of how the legislative process works, the governor has the benefit of being able to hold this bill for up to 10 days before he takes action. The Constitution allows that. I'd encourage him to do that because we're already on a downward trend on the current data. He could wait a handful of days and see if that trend continues or upticks. But we thought it was important to have a plan in place so that if we reach that point from a public health and data perspective, that we can safely begin to reopen businesses, that we would be able to do so. Because as I said consistently during the debate on this bill, this really has two other components. It's those who want to and can safely do so. It's important that those individuals can work. The story I shared for a local individual is a surveyor. He works for himself. He's the only employee that they have. And I shared that story on the House floor because, we've seen encouragement to go outside and recreate and stay healthy, and he can do that by himself. He could also work by himself, but unfortunately he's been excluded by this process through the waivers. And I think that's unfortunate. In addition to looking at essential and non-essential businesses, we have to look at safe and unsafe ways to operate. And I think that that's something that's missing in the current construct. I think this bill gives that to us. Where we go going forward, we're going to continue to work with the governor and try to develop that plan because I think it's important for the Commonwealth to have a plan. And right now there isn't one.
Yeah, well, look, I want to thank you for coming on, and hopefully you'll come back and keep us posted on things. I hope you and the governor can, get together on this and we can figure out a way to move forward. But I want to thank you for appearing. And I notice you're in your district office. I can see in the background you're at work, and I want to thank you for that. All right, coming up next, Mark Levy from the Associated Press joins me. We're going to talk about you and voting on June 2nd.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back to the program. Joining me is Mark Levy. He's with the Associated Press. Mark, one of the things that's really important is when we vote on June 2nd, technically we can vote before June 2nd by using the mail-in ballot process. In a recent primary vote that took place in the state of Wisconsin, more people actually voted by mail than showed up in person. So tell our viewers the mail-in process, what's it all about, and why this, for the first time in Pennsylvania history, it will be used for voting in the primary on June 2nd.
Yeah, so this is a law that the governor signed and the legislature passed in October. It came about fairly quickly, but it brought Pennsylvania into the ranks of most other states with this sort of broad mail-in provision. So what we've seen now is approaching 300,000 people have signed up for either an absentee ballot or a mail-in ballot to vote by mail in the June 2nd primary. So that is, this is the first time we're having an election based on this new mail-in ballot law. Previously, you could mail in an absentee ballot, but you needed to qualify for a certain excuse. For instance, you had a religious objection to showing up in person, or you were going to be traveling, or you were sick or infirm. But this is a mail-in ballot for any reason, and we are seeing that record-breaking numbers signing up for that. At the same time, we're also starting to see some very heavily populated counties asking the governor to allow them to conduct the primary entirely by mail, to use his emergency disaster powers to allow them to take a couple steps that they may not actually have under current law.
Yeah, one of the problems might be when you talk about doing all mail-in ballot, and that debate's going on in other states as well. one of the problems, it seems to me, is how do I put this? The lack of reliability on registration figures and registration data. Bottom line, you could end up with people who are on the registration books but aren't really living in a certain place, or maybe that won't matter because of the mail. But and then
That's right.
disability. Go ahead.
There's a couple things going on here. One of them is that people may have moved, they may have died. So if you send them a ballot directly, as some counties are asking the governor to allow them to do, the governor's office has expressed that concern that you may be sending a ballot somewhere where there's no voter actually living, even though they are registered at that address. In law, you have to apply for it first. You apply for it, you can do it online, and then you get the ballot mailed to you. So there is some friction there. We don't know what the governor's going to do. He said that he is considering options for increasing the number of people who will vote by mail in the June 2nd primary.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big change for many Pennsylvanians, but I'll tell you, if the lockdown, I'll call it a lockdown, if we're all in isolation, so to speak, stay at home, the bottom line is that this is only going to increase. It wouldn't shock me if more people vote that way than actually show up at the polls. What do you think?
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the Bernie Sanders dropping out of the presidential primary and endorsing Joe Biden may have taken some of the energy out of the primary to vote. There's lots of races on it. I mean, every state house seat is up. Every half of the state Senate seats are up. All of the state's congressional delegation in the U.S. House, they're all up.
All right. Look, I want to thank you for coming on. You and your family stay safe and well.
Thank you.
All right. Coming up, we're going to hear from representatives from the Pennsylvania Association of Nurse Anesthetists. They're on the front line. We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, joining me is Angela DiDonato. She is the president of the Pennsylvania Association of Nurse Anesthetists. That is something of a mouthful, isn't it, Angela?
It sure is, Terry.
All right, let's get to the important thing. Nurse anesthetists are on the front line in terms of not just the coronavirus situation, but providing all kinds of important work. Thanks. You all are fearless, and it's important to get your point of view. So first of all, what does a nurse anesthetist do?
Well, first of all, Terry, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. Our organization represents 3,700 nurse anesthetists and students in the state of Pennsylvania. And we basically are on the front lines every day. We provide the majority of the anesthetics, often in conjunction with our physician anesthesiologist colleagues throughout the Commonwealth. We have a really unique skill set that lends us to be really important during this pandemic, because we are critical care trained nurses who then train in anesthesia. And we are, every day we work with ventilator settings and respiratory physiology and really complex critical patients, which is what we're seeing now during this pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's also important is you treat patients, and sometimes even sicker, if that's imaginable, than the folks with the coronavirus. And so, but when you deal with coronavirus, you're right on the front line, along with the doctors and a whole variety of other very important assistants in, hospital assistants in terms of providing the kind of important care that you do.
That's correct. I think that we are a really critical part of this team. We bring a skill set, being able to provide central lines, invasive monitoring, even a big part of taking care of these patients is managing their respiratory physiology in such a way where we're turning the patients onto their belly to get better ventilation. That's something that we do in the operating room all the time when we're working with back surgeries and things like that. So even we've found that we have a critical skill set that is really helpful to this situation.
Yeah. Have you had any reports of a number of your members who've come down with the coronavirus? I mean, you hear about folks who work in hospitals and other medical facilities coming down. Maybe they didn't have the professional equipment that they use. Is that has that happened to some of your members?
It has, Terry. There's been many healthcare providers in the front line that are coming down with COVID-19. I think mostly in the beginning, it seemed as though there were so many people who didn't know that they were coming in contact with it. Initially, we weren't treating everyone as a suspected case. So I think it had more to do with that than lack of equipment, at least in Pennsylvania at this point.
Yeah. Before I let you go,
yeah,
you're certified, but you have an important relationship with other hospital folks like physicians. And where does that all stand? Give me that in a nutshell.
So there's a couple of things that that create some barriers to our being as effective as we can, especially in this situation. Number one is that there's still a physician supervision requirement in the state of Pennsylvania. And especially during this pandemic, CMS has waived all supervision requirements. Multiple states have waived all barriers to supervision to get everyone out to be able to practice to the full extent and be as effective as possible. It frees the physicians up. It also frees us up, and it gives everybody an opportunity to contribute.
Thanks for that. We're going to get one of your colleagues on next, Laura Wiegand. She's going to continue this very, very important discussion. As they say, stay safe and stay well.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
All right, Laura Wiegand from the association joins me. She's the federal political director. Let's have a little chat, Laura, if we can, about the nurse anesthetists in the military and the role that they play.
Thank you, Terry, for having me. I retired in 2017 as a lieutenant colonel from the United States Air Force, so I have active duty and reserve time. And when we don't have title designation in the state of Pennsylvania for certified registered nurse anesthetist, we can only be considered a registered nurse under the state professional licensure committee. We do hold a board certification through our national organization, but when we try to deploy rapidly in response to emergencies and disasters and for combat situations, we have to put forward our licenses. And when we do this, it seems like there's always a holdup. So as a military CRNA, I've held multiple state licenses in order to get that credential through quicker. And so cutting the red tape in the state of Pennsylvania and declaring as certified registered nurse anesthetist at the professional licensure committee and at the board of nursing would really help cut the red tape.
Now, what was surprising and what I learned, mainly because you sent the material to me, was that you've been providing your service since World War I?
Well, it's actually been longer than that, but it's only been officially since World War I. So nurses were providing anesthesia on the Civil War battlefields. So we have a really storied history. And Alice McGaw was the mother of anesthesia, and she dropped ether for the Mayo brothers at their clinic. And after that, originally, the surgeons didn't want other physicians to see their skill, so they trusted the nurses. So nurses are always very trusted in the profession. We bring the art and science along with compassion to our skills, and it really helps, especially in time of crisis and when people are very frightened during the coronavirus.
Yeah, we've had other healthcare professionals on, and we asked them about personal protective equipment. What's the situation with the folks who provide the important service that you do?
Well, our organization came together and decided shortly after the CDC announced that bandanas and other face coverings would be appropriate to use rather than nothing, that we would provide our nurse anesthetists with masks. We looked into several avenues in how to do this. And if we bought N95 masks for everybody, it would be cutting into supply chains for hospital organizations, and we didn't want to do that. So we ended up creating our own. We partnered with several engineers, biochemists, and a 3D print company. And we came up with this mask. It has a filter on the front that can be, disconnected. And it comes with 3 replacement filters. And there's actually a seal on the inside, and you can put it on your face, and it seals pretty well. It is not, NIOSH certified or anything like that, but it beats the heck out of a bandana, and we wanted to protect our members.
Yeah, before I let you go, there's something, and I'm going to get this right, respiratory pandemic that you've referred to. Yes.
So COVID-19 is something that is aerosolized, and it can stay in the air for quite a bit. We're learning, since it's so new, we're learning as we go. Our certified registered nurse anesthetists are in the front lines. They're intubating the patients. They are right in the face of these patients as they're coughing, as this is being aerosolized into the air. So we really need to protect them from the viral load and make sure that they stay healthy throughout the course in order to continue to take care of the patients. And that's our biggest concern as an organization. We hope that your members don't have to use this, because if they have to use this mask, it's an emergency mask.
All right, well, look, I want to thank you. We're about out of time. I want to thank you for coming on and the work that you do.
Thank you, Terry.
Hey, folks, thanks for watching this edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.